We decided to shoot a 5-episode murder mystery over the course of a single 24-hour period in which we didn't sleep a dime. People did tell us it was impossible. They told us that it shouldn't be done. They told us to not do it. They told us to give up. If I didn't have you by my side, I might have believed it.
I would even argue that we had an all-nighter before we started the all-nighter.
That is part of the craziest part of the story. 70% of them ghosted us. 20% of them responded and said, sorry, no. 10% said, tell me more. Of that 10%, they were like, heck no. And there was one that said, call me. Why did we do this?
That's a great question.
So, I feel like to fully break this down, we have to go way zoom out to the start.
Taking it way back.
So, this was early on in our relationship, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
actually.
Shockingly so that we actually agreed to do this. But we were having a conversation with one of our peers, and they said something along the lines of like, oh yeah, we shot 2 films in 48 hours over the weekends. They were like, this was crazy. And then I'm pretty sure I looked over to Taye and was like, I think we could probably shoot 5 in 24 hours. Kind of as a joke.
It was very much a joke. Let's just clear the air for a quick second. It was
a joke, but I also meant it.
jest.
Like, I knew we could.
Sure. But I took it as a joke. This person took it as a joke. It was funny. We all laughed. Ha, 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 ha. Like, it was...
Yes.
No action needed to follow. And then...
In that same very conversation, after that joke, there was like a moment of silence almost. And it was like, well, wait a minute. What if we did?
Yeah.
And then it became, okay, well, Taye is super passionate about writing. Spencer, I'm super passionate about directing and story. We're both super passionate about producing. What if we did this? And it kind of just steamrolled from there. It was like a snowball rolling down the hill.
It was. And I think if there was one additional person of reason, it just wouldn't have happened. Because we're also the type of friends that's like, okay, I have this crazy idea. Let's turn, I don't know, our family station wagon into a food truck. It's like, yes, let's do it. And then we go do it.
This is actually kind of funny, too, because I think in a past episode, we talked about like building a spaceship set.
That's right.
In my mom's house, if we needed to. Which is
the
something we
idea
would
on the
do
show.
if we had to. So I think in our nature is to just come up with an impossible idea, then actually try to do it.
That's right.
Which has caused much stress, sleep deprivation, and everything in between. But we did this.
And it was expensive.
And we're about to talk through pretty much everything that went into this.
That's
and
right.
I don't even know where we're supposed to start. There's so much that went into this.
Let's take it way back. All right, so let's take back to this moment. So the actions that follow were like, okay, what if we did it? And then we actually were like, hold on, what if we did it? And then it was like, okay, we could do this, we could do that, we could do everything that followed. The writing itself was kind of excruciating because, let's see, who was it? It was you, 2 additional peers that were on set, myself, all in a room together. And all of you were basically sharing what ideas you had. And I was quickly writing them down in a notebook, trying to blend them all together.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yes, because at first we didn't actually know if we wanted them to be cohesive or just 5 independent films. And I think the initial idea actually was just 5 independent short films that have nothing to do with each other. But then the more we thought about it, it's like, okay, well, singular location, so the cohesion of the story would make sense for them to be connected.
Yep.
It allows it to be a little bit grander of a thing.
For sure.
It also increases the stakes because if they were independent films and we made 4 films, it was like, hey, we still made 4 short films.
Yeah.
With this, if we didn't finish...
It was missing narrative.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it was one collective story.
And I wrote 25 log lines and basically pitched them all to you. And you guys broke that down to like 5 you liked, and then it was whatever. And then I wrote basically a synopsis of a few different stories that then you guys chose. Do you remember the coffee shop one?
I do.
I love the coffee
Just still think we should revisit
I think we should.
at some point.
I think we should. More on that later. Anyway, besides that, though, it was really exciting to be in such a high-stakes writing environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Well, like, we greenlit the project without a script.
yeah,
So, and that's usually not how this would go.
no,
But
no,
first of all, we were first years in college.
that's right.
So we didn't entirely know what we're doing. But also, the idea of doing the thing in 24 hours actually came before the story.
That's right.
Which I feel like in a way is a little contradictory to some of the things we talk about because we're always heavily pushing for story. But I think part of this thing we wanted to create was the story of doing this in 24 hours. That's part of the story we wanted to tell, and we're currently in post-production of a documentary of that very thing, which some of the footage from will be featured in here as a little teaser.
Okay, let's pause on one moment. The why. So as far as why we did this, we were very clear that we wanted to make a statement that the value of 24 hours is unscalable. The fact that we chose to do the shoot in 24 hours was a demonstration on the fact that, hey, we all have one day. What are you going to do with it? And then we did that.
Yeah.
As far as the actual, story aspect, the documentary, that was the creme de la creme of the documentary. And that was a major, I'll say, a character in that narrative. Which, by the way, we had a documentary crew on set with us documenting the entire thing. So we had 3 separate cameras that were rolling for, a little less than 24 hours in between spots where they break. But yeah, we had days and days of footage.
It took us weeks to even review the footage, to even start the edit.
And we had a little bit of like, oh my gosh, we're back in that space when we were.
It was almost like difficult to revisit.
Yeah.
'Cause I was like, some of the things I forgot even happened.
That's right. We blocked out a lot.
Okay, so we're writing the scripts, and it gets to the point where it pretty much is just you and me on the story team.
That's right.
And it's kind of like you're writing, and you bring it to me, we rip it apart, we think about it, because the interesting thing about a murder mystery is like it has to be so interwoven.
Yeah.
And we're really trying to create this complex narrative, and we spent a lot of time really trying to refine that.
I also had no
a lot
time.
Of late nights.
Like, truly, bro.
Turnaround time for everything was short.
And I remember at one point you were like, Tay, we got to get this script. Like we got to move. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And like that night, I had an all-nighter and banged out like 3 of the 5.
It wasn't the first all-nighter
into
even prepping for the all-nighter.
There were multiple all-nighters leading up to the main one.
100%.
I would even argue that we had an all-nighter before we started the all-nighter.
Yeah, and we'll get there. That is part of the craziest part of the story. But yeah, the writing process was unique and different in so many ways, and also to write something episodic too was such a different experience for us.
Yeah, completely. And it's also just sensational that, brother, we look back at this with such fond memories. And it was such an amazing time. And I do want to make it clear that we weren't making a final result. We were making a process. So the beauty that took place around, I don't know, the fact that students still come up to us and are like, that was such an amazing experience for me. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. It's like, hey, we were really passionate and we wanted to work with you. And
I would argue that is the art that was made.
That was
more important than anything else.
I completely agree. And it was just fun. It was fun to work with people I care about. And I don't know. That's what it was about.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. So let's try to dive our heads back into pre-production.
Okay, yeah.
So we faced a lot of challenges, right? A lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And we had an unnamed budget. We're not going to reveal the exact figure, but it was probably, I guess, what would be what's interpreted as like a standard senior capstone kind of budget, right?
Yeah.
So it stretched thin, especially for the size of the crew, the fact that we also had a documentary team, and we were trying to tell the story of a murder mystery in which the murder victim was a billionaire. So that defaultly means our environment has to look like the environment of a billionaire. So I want us to talk about location.
Oh, okay.
Well, so early on, we started looking for locations, and this was the first time we ever did proper paying for a location that we had no connection to. We fully did this like we were producing a film, and which was also such an amazing part of this experience is we got to do so many things for the first time. But as we're seeing all these things for the first time, we're looking at these various mansions and stuff, and we see $400 an hour, $300 an hour, $700 an hour. Insane figures. And even more so, this is a 24-hour shoot. So whatever that figure is, you have to multiply it by 24 plus maybe a couple hours before for us to, move in and get the crew in, and a couple hours after for everyone to move out.
Yeah.
So we were looking at location expenses alone were like multiples higher than our budget.
Yeah. So, yes. And we still settled on location. We
did.
found a phenomenal location, and they were so kind to allow us to shoot there. But do you remember the one mansion, the one that was...
Whenever I look up our location website, the auto Google fill takes me to that specific listing of it. So every time I'm reminded.
So our ideal property was, I think, $12 million.
It's this huge mansion, like big columns, like super grand, perfect for the character and where he would have lived.
And we could not have actually used all of it just because of the scale of the property.
I don't think by the end of the day we would have even been
visited
in every room.
Exactly. That's how large this was. And we reached out to... This also just shows how we wanted it, man. We emailed, I think, upwards of 80 properties, something like that.
I think it's more.
You think it's more?
We knew we needed an impossible location. And the only way to do that was to try to establish some kind of relationship with someone and offer them some kind of value other than dollars.
Yeah.
And so we went through and we sent email after email after email to dozens upon dozens of houses that we were like, we could make this film here. We could shoot the story here. And 70% of them ghosted us, did not get a response. The other 30%, 20% of them responded and said, sorry, no. And then the other 10% said, tell me more. And then of that 10%, once we told them more, they were like, heck no. And there was one house, that said, call me. Okay. Hop on a call with them. And they're a busy human being, clearly, because they are in control of a house of this nature. So on the phone, and they're like, tell me about this. I'm like, well, I haven't prepped a pitch. I have to sell this thing now. And I remember you were in the room with me when I took the call, and I just started going into it. I explained the project, why we were passionate about it, why we were doing it, the importance of we wanted to demonstrate the value of a day and how much we should appreciate everyone, and that we were students, and really tried to sell this thing. And they had a few questions and whatnot, and they ended up letting us shoot there at a pretty significant discount. This being said, we also had to think about how can we create value for them in some other way. And we were like, okay, well, we make videos. We're not too shabby at it. I don't want to toot our own horns, but we can make reasonable videos. And this person, due to the fact that they had this house and that they were using it for film locations, it was a natural assumption that they had a business of some sorts.
Yep.
So we arranged to kind of shoot them a production and make them a video in exchange for a extremely steep discount on what the house would be.
Sure.
And so I think there's two kind of lessons in here, which one is that it was super important to explain why and the passion behind the project, right? Because we wanted them to be invested in it as well.
Very much.
And help kind of realize the impact of that. But two, we also had to figure out how can we make this a no-brainer for them? How can we make this a great opportunity for them as much as it is for us?
Because it was bargaining. It was
that's
everything.
Really what's fair. And it's a very like businessy aspect of this world we live in.
For sure.
But if we didn't attempt that, if we gave up after 5 houses, we probably would have been filming in like one of our friends' houses that, while probably lovely and nice, probably didn't look like a billionaire's house. So we had to figure out how do we provide value to this person. And the way we best knew how to do that was to offer them video services effectively.
Exactly.
And we ended up getting a pretty amazing location that I'm extremely grateful for.
Which was more than 4 times our budget and value. So that was a win.
That was an absolute win.
Huge win. But besides that, bro, it was also just fun to like go through that process. I learned so much. We learned about insurance through that.
Yeah.
At one point we were like, my dad sent me just pamphlets and pamphlets on what does insuring a film look like? What type of insurance you need? And we had so many questions. Do we need workers' comp? What does auto insurance looks like? Can we call Flow from Progressive? Like, what does this look like?
And more so, how do you insure a film in which people have to stay up for 24 hours straight?
Yes.
Because that's like not what there's no insurance company that specializes
Exactly.
in like stunt filmmaking like that.
No.
And so we were on the phone with all kinds of different companies, and it was a huge learning opportunity to get to do those things.
For sure.
And so while I think a lot of times people are like, oh, we can just skip insurance, like we'll just be low key. It's like, well, you're not only, first of all, doing the right thing and making sure to protect your people, your equipment, the location owner, and everyone involved, but also you're getting to learn a pretty complicated aspect of this world we want to inhabit.
For sure.
And you're getting to do it on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
Like we got to insure this film set, which while for us was the biggest thing we'd ever put on, in the larger world of filmmaking, it's still a smaller crew, smaller amount of locations, smaller amount of dollar figure in terms of gear that needs to be insured. So like it was a way where we could do a trial run almost of figuring that out. And since then, insurance is no longer this like stressful thing where we're reading dozens of pamphlets. It's like, you're calling the insurance guy this week?
Right.
Cool. Tell me the information.
Exactly.
Tell me the quote. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Here's the address.
Exactly.
And so it's like
Sensations.
by doing that and putting the investment in that one time, we've kind of almost unlocked that as like an asset and a skill set to us.
And it's the standard. There's no budging on insurance. If someone says, hey, can you produce this film for me? I'm like, sure. I'm going to need a budget for insurance. We got to have this conversation. I have to talk to my broker. Like, oh, I'm not trying to do all that. It's like, okay, I can't produce your film because if I'm going to attach my name to this, if I'm in any way associated with this, I got to protect the people there. Absolutely. And that's more than just on paper. That's moral. That's, in my eyes, that is just as important as I think anything on set. Having proper safety belts, having anything that I don't know. I care so much about this art form. I care so much about the people that I work with. And to risk that on something that's actually quite simple and quite easy, that feels insulting to the medium and to the people there.
When we say we're doing a $0 film, as in like a $0 budget,
sure,
what we mean is we'll buy insurance. We're going to feed our crew phenomenally. We're going to have every proper safety precaution on set in terms of first aid, in terms of feminine care products, and whatnot. So our $0 film probably more means like hundreds of dollars, potentially like 1,000 or more. But every single dollar on the $0 film goes to like the people, the team, taking care of them. And so we won't spend $1 on production design, on a new piece of gear, on a rental, or any of these other things until we've reached our threshold of what we feel is right and safe for our crew, for our actors, for our people, because that is the priority. And we have to tell these stories, and which is very important to us. We have to do it in a way that cares for the storytellers.
Yep. Completely accurate. I think that's right. And listen, we made a few mistakes. We learned about, okay, we didn't need this sort of insurance. Okay, next time we have to have this. It's all a learning experience. But it's also, like you said, we have this wealth of knowledge now, or what I think is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to insurance. And it was fun. I really enjoyed that. We were also learning about it in class and then applying it. We've talked about this before, but when Scott was breaking down pre-production for us in the classroom, we applied that the next week.
Which I also think is what's so important, because there are certainly people who take all those classes and receive the exact same inputs in terms of knowledge as us, but then maybe lack that at some point. Like, we've worked with seniors who have taken that class and yet lack that knowledge because it went in one ear. Maybe they took the test, passed the class, and then they deleted it.
And they heard it was optional.
Right.
It's not.
We receive the information, step one. Step two is use it. Really, I think whatever you're trying to do, there's probably some ways you can apply that today. And so you're not just receiving the knowledge, you're then taking it and using it. And there's no need to wait to use it until after you graduate, until your capstone. If you really want to do this today. Which I think was part of what made this film such a great learning opportunity. Because I think the most important thing that you and I got out of this, other than the creation and the getting to platform the crew and build that space, for us ourselves, it was just learning opportunities. Like, we forced ourselves to have to learn these things. We all know what makes a good film is good people. And building our team for this set was very important to us, and we had a lot of conversations about us.
Yeah.
How do we handle that?
Who A, would want to be a part of this? Who B, would want to be a part of this for absolutely no financial gain?
And who's crazy enough to want to do it?
Who's crazy enough to do it, but also who's like willing to be there on the 23rd hour with an hour left, equipment's not wrapped, they're tired, they've had nothing but, a burger, 5-hour energy, and they're holding a C-stand. Like, what is that? Who are those people? And we probably talked about this the most, even more than location, I think, at least in the early initial stages.
Yeah. Because we knew early on that for this to work, the people had to be right.
And I think we should break this up into cast and crew. Cast was one thing because we had a separate room on set that was held with Crafty, as well as, it just so happens that this space had reclining chairs. It was a space for the cast to sleep in between scenes.
Yeah.
So they didn't look tired. And that was really important. As far as crew goes, they had to be up all the whole time.
The whole time. And we also wanted it to be first year college students specifically. Yeah. And I think the reason that was important is we also wanted to demonstrate that, like, you don't have to wait to be able to do something like this. There's nothing that's possessed by this crew or this team that anyone watching or hearing about this story doesn't have. Everyone on this set was new to this. Our first AC had never pulled focus before. Yeah. So a lot of this experience was first-time things for everyone.
Yeah. And that added to the beauty of the space because there was less ego. There was less, hey, you should actually do it this way. First of all, we wanted to fill out that anyway. But also, there was a purity to the set. We didn't do everything right, and I know that. But it also allowed it to be what it was. And it was something pretty beautiful.
I remember once we picked our people, and we first just said, like, hey, we have a project we want to talk to you about. Can you meet us at this room at this time? Yeah. And we didn't tell them the 24-hour thing yet because we wanted to address this in person because it's kind of crazy when we wanted to be able to properly explain it.
It was actually really hard because people would approach us before the meeting like, all right, can you just clear the
tell me about a little something.
Just wait for the meeting, man.
Yeah. But what percent did we think would say yes after that they heard what it was?
I was pretty sold on 3 people of 15.
Yeah.
I think who I think was going to be there. So yeah, I would say a generous would be 4, but 3 people.
Yeah.
I was pretty locked.
Pretty small percentage.
Yeah.
And I remember I started I started my speech kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I fairly early said, like, we are going to be shooting 5 films in 24 hours. And my plan was to follow that statement with, like, bunch of explanation. Because, of course, that needs a bunch of explanation. What a ridiculous idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The entire room cut me off.
Yeah.
And they like, were standing up, smiling, and they were like, we're in. Every single person in that room. There was not a single person who said no.
It was pretty amazing, actually.
And I was like, I haven't even sold you on this. I haven't even told you anything. Yeah. And it was this beautiful moment where it was so clear that they wanted to be there for the art and for the sake of creation. And because of that, I think the set culture and the dynamic between everyone was in this very pure spot of just, we're here to tell the story, we're here to make art, and we're all here for each other. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think there was so much passion between everyone involved in that, and you could feel that in the air on set. Like, it was tangible.
For sure. No, I completely agree. That also, let's go to set for a second. That was also why it was amazing that we helped one another. When we were unloading equipment, audio, camera, everyone was on the same page. Okay, we have cases of water that have to move from point A to point B. Everyone picked up a case of water. There was no, okay, you do this, that. No, it was, everyone picks up a case of water. The purity and equity, the equity on set, man, that was, I've never been on a set like that where people were not only so ready and willing to help, but that was the
actors
included. We're going to talk about this in a second. But that was the expectation because they understood the stakes.
And I couldn't have stopped them if I wanted to.
No. Our actors, one of our actors partway through was like, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you show me how to do this so I can help? Yeah. So what you're going to do this right here, and then you'll twist this. Okay. Yeah, you're good. And then that was their role for the rest of set. They had finished filming their scenes. Yeah. They were like, this is what I want to help out with. I don't want to sleep. I don't want to eat some Cheetos. Like, I'm going to help out.
I was kind of shocked.
It was amazing.
How...
And shame on us for being cynical, but that is the world that we live in when it comes to being on these film sets.
Yeah, and that's our exposure to film sets at that time was exclusively sort of these capstones that we've spoken about in past episodes. And so, yeah, we did have these preconceived kind of notions and interpretations of how people would respond to certain things. And I think we were both kind of caught off guard and in a beautiful way by how adaptive and responsive and willing to help every single person there was.
That's right.
It was incredible to witness.
Exactly.
I want to take us to something kind of abnormal that we did, which was we knew this was a weird set and there was a lot going to be going on. There was going to be a documentary crew. There was all kinds of equipment, multiple cinema cameras. Like there's so much that we were like, we just need a space for everyone to like be together.
Yeah.
But everyone's schedules were so weird that was really hard. So we did an all-day open house the night before.
Yeah.
So we basically had a room and we said at any point, come to this room, test your equipment, meet other people, strategize, like let's talk through things, like basically have in-the-moment meetings of hey, I need this from Taye, I need this from my gaffer, I need this from this.
So let's break this down even more specificer. Let's be a little more specific. So this room was symbolically, the open house also represented this amazing collaborative edifice for people to just be themselves and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. So at one point, we had all the equipment here. We had multiple rentals from many different companies. We had our own personal equipment, cases and cases of gear. And at one point, sound was like, okay, can I take a moment to share with everyone how to properly apply a lavalier mic? Like, sure, take a minute. And then we all made a video sharing it with other people who weren't in the room, who were finishing their class to then come later. And that was great. I remember our first AC and our DP, who was also our cam op, we're setting up camera. And
practicing focus pulling and everything.
She had never used this follow focus or worked in follow focus before. Crushed it, by the way. And was just messing with it for hours and hours, trying to like map. And it's like, can I have an actor stand? And it was great. She crushed it. That was really amazing. And it was a great idea on her part. Like that was needed. Even down to like, I was cutting tennis balls for the C-stands in there.
When you and I, we were coordinating with actors, we were building various kind of individual schedules for people. Yeah. It's like we had meetings and tons of work to do. It honestly was also an amazing day.
It was
the day before. But as the day started to round out, people started to fizzle out and people are leaving. And it's like, there's just me, Taye, and maybe a couple other people there. It's like 11. And we're like, well, we still have another 4 meetings to have and this list of things to do. So that night, when did we go to bed?
We had to be there at 4. I remember getting...
We had to wake up at 4, right?
We had to wake up at 4. I remember getting somewhere between 2.5 and 3 hours of sleep. So I think it was like...
I feel like we parted ways at like 2 a.m.
Oh, we didn't live together at this point. So that was the other thing. Why didn't you sleep on the couch? It doesn't matter. Point is...
I had equipment and stuff in my room.
That's right. So somewhere around 2.5 to 3 hours of sleep.
The night before we had to be up for like 30 hours.
That's right. Both our gaffer as well as our one sound department crew member slept on the couches in my dorm in the living room
to make sure
they got up.
Yeah.
And we were all one another's ride. So it was
So we had to go and do, not just be awake for 30 hours, but do 30 hours of high intensity work
On 2.5 hours of sleep.
on 2 hours. of
On
sleep.
2.5 hours.
It
of
was
sleep.
absolutely insane.
We were finishing shot list. I was building the binder because I still had to do all the math.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if shots weren't finished or like something was happening.
No, so we had the math done in the open house because I remember building everyone's individual
That's right.
schedules.
You were doing
but
that.
we had to talk to the gaffer about
Setup
all of
and
their
whatnot.
nuances, setups, and all these different things. Should that have happened earlier?
Yeah.
Yes. We had what we call, I don't know if this is the industry standard term, but rolling lunches. So
Sure.
there wasn't a dedicated lunchtime. What it would be is like, okay, right now we're setting up lights, sound, and actors go eat lunch, and then they can come back and then it just swaps.
Right.
And I remember it was so crazy that like you almost had to feed me lunch.
Almost? Bro, I held your chicken sandwich for 45 minutes.
Was it actually that long?
Brother, man, I'm holding the clock.
That is insane.
We were in the bedroom scene,
Yeah.
and I was holding your chicken sandwich, and I was like, okay, take a bite now. That was it.
Yeah.
No exaggeration. It wasn't like, oh,
But
here
like,
comes
I
the
don't-
airplane.
Is that my fault? Because like,
Okay, so let's preface this. Spencer does not have the strongest eating habits on set. Now, I can't be talking. I don't either because we get so into it.
yeah, we really do.
We do. In this particular instance, Spencer was directing, so he was operating on such high a level of just needing to be in the moment and such high level of calculating and just being there that food probably wasn't even in the stratosphere of your emotional thoughts.
Right. And I don't feel like there was I didn't really fit in
Sure.
any of the groups that we could send to lunch.
Sure.
Because
Right.
like
he needed
at
to
any
be there.
point in time, whatever the activity was, needed my input
Right.
to be able to move forward.
I always had a snack on my person. So at one point I would open a granola bar for him and just bite this.
and I felt
and-
terrible about that because like I didn't
Okay.
want that to be I didn't like need people
Sure.
to bring that to me. But also I don't think we would have finished otherwise.
First of all, you would have passed out. And that's not
Well,
like
you're right. I just wouldn't have eaten.
you would
That
not
was
have
the
eaten.
alternative.
And at one point, talent was flying you water.
Oh, so many people brought me water. Yeah. People just like would throw in snacks at me and drinks and stuff.
Spencer never had a full meal, which was the other thing. So for 30 hours, he had an assortment of,
Sour
mixed
Patch
nuts,
Kids.
Sour Patch Kids, and I don't know, a Rice Krispie treat. Like,
I missed dinner entirely.
you missed everything entirely.
But
anyway,
I guess the point
we
here
got to
is,
circle back to food at some point. But yeah,
yeah, it was so intense from a time standpoint
that's right.
that the meals had to be kind of
Rolling, yeah.
ingrained in those ways.
And I want to also share, this was all thought of. Every element of time was calculated. It sounds a little more chaotic than it was, frankly, because A, that's filmmaking, and B, that's 24 time. But also, we like measured footpaths and
We had terms on set, like I would say, Taye, you're on the line, which meant I'm going to DIT, which would
oh yeah,
be-
Spencer was running DIT, by the way.
So I might have to go for a couple minutes to offload footage, offload
director.
audio, which means Taye would temporarily become the director so that the set keeps moving. And then Taye, you're off the line, means I'm back, I'm here, you can go back to first ADing. So we even had like hidden codes so that we could simplify our communication. So instead of explaining to Taye, hey, I'm going to go DIT, can you kind of look at, it was just, you're on the line.
Right.
And that was it.
There's just no time. Exactly. Let's go back to food for a second. So in the morning, our first meal was chicken minis. We had somewhere between 160, maybe 200.
We had a gargantuan amount of chicken minis.
They-
We had at least one chicken.
Okay, just to give you a sense of the day, we had more than one chicken, bro. By the end of the day, I had over 12,000 points with Chick-fil-A.
Wait, I didn't even realize that.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, you must be getting Chick-fil-A for free for weeks. Do you still have those points?
Oh, yeah. I can get like 4 free sandwiches.
Did you use that yesterday?
No.
Do you still have the points?
Yeah.
You got to use those, man.
Well,
That was really amazing. And food, psychologically, we talked about this a lot.
so the idea that food had to be this visual surplus in their head, we measured out bottles of water per day. So we had 8 bottles of water per person for, the day.
Yeah. Plus a whole arrangement of other drinks.
Yes.
But I think
everything possible.
one of the key importances here is it had to look like an extravagant buffet.
Yes.
And part of this reason is because we needed people to understand that we had their backs and that we were there for them.
For sure.
And so it was important not to just buy like one of those multi-cardboard box of chips and be like, hey, we got crafty. It's like, no, we have like a suite. We wanted people to enter the crafty room and feel like they could like just kind of breathe and be like,
yes,
I'm taken care of.
And see them. See them. I don't know where I got. See them.
See them.
Oh, boy. All right. Wow. Going down to the, man. Did you hear that? Y'all hear that?
He's from Georgia now.
I'm from Georgia. Anyway, they had to see themselves in the snacks. They had to see, our sound mixer wanted sour candy. So we got a family-sized bag of Sour Patch Kids.
That was like a bathtub.
We went to Costco, y'all. Like it was,
Yeah.
it had to be those things. And I don't know if you remember this. You probably don't. But I went around at one point with a bag of Swedish fish, just offering people emotional Swedish fish, emotional Swedish fish. Like that was it.
Yeah,
it was
I'm
funny.
pretty sure I took you up on that one time.
did.
Even like one of our actors.
That's right, I was
we
just about
got
to say.
beef jerky for him because I was.
He's a bodybuilder.
Right.
Bodybuilder.
So we need to make sure we had
Strongman.
proper kind of
He was
protein
strongman.
in place for
Excuse
that.
me. Yeah.
Of course, caffeine was another consideration. We spent a lot of money on energy drinks, while also still establishing in the culture that everyone needs to have a reasonable limit for these type of products, just like sugar or any other.
We were careful to not let that one get too far. So we did have coffee. We did have Red Bull. Okay, New York just came out again. I'm all over the map, y'all. I'm so sorry. We had coffee. Anyway, we had all of those things. And it had to be important. So I want to take us back to a moment, and we can cut this out if you want, but I think it is important to discuss.
Okay.
Because not only is this important to both of us, it's important to the people on set. And just like insurance, I think it should be a standard. Let's talk about our realization in the snack aisle that you and I both had. We had our Ocean's 11 moment. At one point, we had
this
finished,
actually was the best Ocean's 11 moment we've ever had.
I think
we
it was
didn't mention it
spectacular.
at all.
And I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the
Can
back.
we recreate this for a second?
Sure.
Okay.
We are in the snack aisle. We are pulling snacks, and I look at our cart, and I basically and verbally say, "Is that a good idea?"
Yeah, we absolutely need that.
And there was a beat in between this, but like, I'm like, Spencer, I have a thought, and I don't know if I don't know if this is appropriate for me to be thinking or asking. But
And then
what do
I
you
literally
think?
stopped you before you said it
Yes.
and said, we should have feminine care products.
That's right. So 24 hours is a demanding day to be on set.
1
And
million
so
percent.
much of our, I guess, just care around people, we want to make sure we were covering all bases. So I brought my YSL cologne just to spray people because we couldn't shower. Disgusting. But like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
And we reached out to one of our friends when the open house was taking place, and we asked them if they could go to Target and pick up some feminine care products. So we had tampons and pads, and we also recognized that we did not know what we were asking for.
Well, yeah, because at first we thought we were just going to go and buy it ourselves, but
Exactly.
we were like, let's set up in reality here.
We have no idea what we're doing.
Someone, we know people who will
Right.
be able to get the right stuff and the right amount.
Exactly. Because we didn't. So I said we had 20 people and this many and all the things. And that was it. And they were like, of course I'm going to do that. And we have that now. And that's, again, not only, it's not an extra. That's our standard. And for lack of a better term, brother, that's our brand. I think you, me, Luka, when we put on a show, there's a certain association of like, that's going to be there with us. And that's way more important to me than any camera, we care, bro. We care so much.
Well, and back to this idea of like the $0 film.
That's what I'm saying.
The
That will be
$0
there.
means $0 after all of that stuff.
That's right.
And if we can't do that stuff, then we shouldn't produce a film.
And
we're not ready.
Exactly. And I'm not willing to compromise that.
Yeah, I'll put it on a credit card without the money
For
to
sure.
pay off the credit card if we had to.
Right. And also, I want to be
the best leader I can be. And if someone says, hey, I need this, I'm going to be really upset with myself that I can't provide that. Because A, that shows
And
how
people
unempathetic
now
I am.
ask us
Yes.
outside of
Yes.
film sets.
Yes.
And luckily, we're able to be helpful in those spaces.
Yeah.
Which is super important.
In the dorm, we both have that. It's just who we are, bro.
And we always will.
Yeah. We had to touch on that because those are the details that matter. And it has nothing to do with
Right.
us.
And-
it's just the standard of filmmaking that we want to be a part
Yeah.
of.
And I think to blow this up to the big picture, I know this has all very much been through the example of this particular film, the 24-hour, the death by murder, the 5-episode murder mystery, whatever you want to call it. But I think the takeaway here is that these things will always be important and should always be the things that are prioritized.
Mhm.
This idea of the $0 film, I think is super important for us and for anyone listening.
Yeah.
That really what that means is you do everything to take care of every single human being, every single person, every single
Yeah.
individual on your set. And that is at the point of $0. You have to start negative, and then that should be the first investment.
Agreed.
Like to even fathom like having a lens on set, like a cool extra lens, but not having enough food for people
Mhm.
or feminine care products or proper first aid or insurance. That's just off the table. Like how awful would it be if any of those things were needed and you bought the lens instead?
I just wouldn't. It'd be devastating for me personally, and just for the crew who needs it,
Yeah.
and cast who needs it. But more than that, bro, like we talk about story. I'll take it back to culture. We care about this art form, and we say that every episode. But we care about the people who make it. So when you and I are talking about planning our next shoot, when Luka is writing a script, he's like, I've got this great idea. All of us are 4 steps ahead saying, hey, yeah, this is going to be a great story. This is going to be an amazing, amazing film for us to be part of. Here's the crew I'm thinking. Okay, great. I'll talk to my insurance rep. Okay, I'll go to Target and get what we need. Those things follow immediately.
Yeah.
Those things are in the same breath. They're in the same
and there's never
stadium.
like a should we do this?
No.
It's just when are we doing this?
Yeah.
Who's driving?
Right, exactly.
It's always Luka.
It is always
we
Luka.
can't
He just
drive.
put up his hand. Yeah. Well, we can drive. I've
I've yet to
Luka-
see it.
If Luka
what?
gave
Said I've yet to see it.
Hold on. Okay, I don't have it on me, but I have my permit. I have a permit.
yeah, so if Luka gave you his keys, you couldn't legally take his car.
If he was 25.
If he was in the car with you.
Right.
Huge difference.
Okay.
Anyways, that's irrelevant. But
Do you want to say anything more on culture on the film set?
a student was talking to me and they asked me a question of some nature, and it was like, you know, how do I get people on my set to be as passionate as I am? Like, I don't want them to not try as hard because it's just the weekend film set or whatnot. And I really thought about this because I was like, well,
It's a great question.
a lot of people do treat sets like that.
Mhm.
So what can we do to make these special so that people want to care about it? Because you can't force people to care about anything. And so I really tried to bring it back to the 24 because whether intentional or not, that happened. Everyone was so unfathomably passionate about it that everyone brought 150% to the table.
That's right. That's right.
And I think part of what that is this idea of the set culture, of these little things. Like, hey, you're going to be well fed. You're going to have a buffet of snacks, of drinks. But also, you're going to work with other collaborators that are nice, kind,
right.
amazing people to work
what I'm
with.
saying.
We're going to
Yes,
tell a story
yes.
that's meaningful, that we believe in, that we think could impact
All
someone.
the things.
And it's these things compounding that builds that culture, right? It's if you just try to identify one of these, you will have entirely missed the point.
Mhm.
It's caring about all of these things, and whether
That's right.
people consciously recognize it or not, that's what flips in them in terms of whether this is a weekend get it done project or art to them, something that they
Sure.
feel they have to do.
That's right.
And when we have all of these little things, even when someone just goes to the bathroom and notices that there are feminine care products there, even if they don't need them in that moment, they know that they're heard and that we're here for them and that those resources have been made available. I think that's the answer to the question. There's no like one task to solve the culture problem.
Yeah.
It is the hard thing to do. It is you have to care about all of the things that a lot of people don't want to, that are difficult, that cost more money and don't directly result in a better quality picture.
That's right.
And that is the difference, though. And it will actually result in a stronger story as well as happier people who had a better experience.
That's right, bro. I think I have one response and then we can move on. But someone once said on a film set, I asked them a question. I don't even remember what the question was, but their response was, if you have to tell someone that something exists, if you have to explain to them what that looks like, then it's not real. And in this setting, if you have to tell someone to have passion or explain that to them, then they don't have it.
You can't fake it.
You cannot fake passion on a film set. And quite frankly, actions speak louder than words. So I know everyone was passionate on the 24 because they carried water, because they carried a C-stand. And I'm not saying weight is what matters here. I'm saying they were a part of a whole, and they understood that.
Yeah.
And the people that I have worked with, and granted, even people on the 24 who were disrespectful in that manner, that's shown. And that's shown on the next set and the set in the future. And whatever it is that defines passion for people, it has no budget. And you and I and Luka could all sit down and write another short script and produce it, and we can all be equally as passionate about it. But we think long and hard about the people we share that with based on their passion. And it's rarely about skill, y'all. It's rarely ever something like, hey, who's going to be the best focus puller? It's like, hey, who's not going to be a jerk? Hey, who's going to be an amazing collaborator? Whose energy do I want on set? And that's not...
Who's going to hold their hand out to lift someone else up?
Exactly. And it's also not who is our friend, who is the right person for this situation.
Absolutely.
What didn't work?
We've spent a lot of this episode talking about all of the moments that worked on the 24, the moments that we learned from, the moments that we want to recreate in our future sets. But like everything, there's also a wide list of things that didn't work, could have been better, or things that we know to improve on the next one.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of these, and I think we can bring it all the way back to writing.
I was going to say, can we start with story? Can I go first? Okay. I want to be a screenwriter, y'all. I've said it in previous episodes. I've said it to everyone I've ever met who's had a conversation with me longer than 3 minutes. I want to be a screenwriter. This story did not work. I think the bones of it are there, and I'm disappointed that I wasn't... I don't know. I think it could have been a better story, and I wish I could have done a better job. I'm happy with the product we did make, and I'm happy with, what happened. I'm happy with the story that will unfold because of it. It does burn me that I wasn't on the same level that I think I could have been or should have been. But I think on a writing level, it was not where it needed to be.
So, to chime in here, Taye and I watched a cut all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And after, we both knew, similar to that moment in Target, the moment we've had a dozen times before, but it didn't work. The story fell flat. It was confusing, and it doesn't work.
It's not there either. Yeah.
This being said, we also caught ourselves and said, this is a win.
Yeah.
because we could make the mistake of sitting here looking at this, patting ourselves on the back saying what a good job we did, and never knowing what we did wrong, and then making the same mistake over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we try to reframe it to ourselves as like, we have a list of 100 things we have to do better next time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would so much rather have that list than not and be blind to it.
Yeah.
So I think it was a great thing. But yeah, the story didn't work. And you should own a part of that. Part of that is the writing. But at the same time, I signed off on the scripts. I own part of that as well. Some of the execution from a directorial standpoint, which was my job, was missed, was not
No, I get it.
optimized. And to thus tie this in, one of the flaws of this set and the story we were telling as far as the actual narrative goes is that time was more important than story. And we knew this from the get-go, right? We're trying to film 5 films in 24 hours. So to some degree, that is the ultimate goal, is to make the film, do the impossible in this time window. And that did impact the story. It really did.
For sure.
And it's not like we didn't know that going into it. It's not like we didn't think, hey, if we shot this for a week straight, we could make it stronger.
For sure.
These were all things we were aware of, but it still does bleed into the storytelling, which is almost why you referenced earlier that the documentary is almost like the main outcome of this as far as content goes.
Probably was,
and you're right. And we even addressed that in pre-production.
Yes,
We said
yes, we did.
the stronger film we're probably going to make is the documentary because we have to make time the victor to story.
Yep. Which, in this setting, I think the doc is really strong. So I'm not mad at any of the process either. The culture we built on set, spectacular. So grateful. Disappointed as a writer, because that is who I am at the end of the day. And it does live rent free in my head. And I know
And we had infinite time on that. So I think we can attribute
to
some,
an extent. To an extent, we had infinite time.
I guess what I mean by that is it wasn't as fixed as the actual 24 window itself.
Sure.
So some of the onset things I can forgive, but
Right.
for the writing, there were so many things that both you and I should have caught.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And that's okay. And that's okay. Because we won't do those same mistakes next time. Like, we've learned fundamental storytelling lessons that we bring up regularly in our works as we're writing. We're like, hey, this feels like scene 3 or episode 3, scene 2.
Sure.
And we're like,
Yep.
you're right.
Yeah.
We need more movement. We need there to be action.
It is not a
happening in the scene.
dynamic film. I also want to say something that we mentioned before. I was trying to fit a feature into a short film. As far as story and narrative goes,
The scope of it.
the scope of it, it was too, not ambitious, because it's not. It wasn't a loss or a misnavigation on how grand we wanted the story to be. It just had too many moving parts.
The total runtime is like 20 minutes, and
You need
the complexity of the story probably needed at least double that. At least.
I have notes on what's the favorite color of the chef. Every writer should know the favorite color of every character, but you don't know that when you leave. And that doesn't have to be shown, but you have to understand the character inside and out, especially when writing. And I did, but the page does not reflect that. And that's what hurts. That's what's hard.
But also, it's also a great opportunity because you and I have on our to-do list to sit down and rewrite this with as many pages as it takes.
Yep.
Which will probably never make it. Who knows? That's not what's important, though.
I'll at least be able to sleep at night again.
It's the exercise of doing that. And I really encourage anyone to ever do that with any film they make because it costs you nothing. And it forces you to like address the things that didn't work and that you didn't like specifically on that film. Because yes, we have these lessons that we will take on the next film, but when we have to address them within the same world, the same story, like there is no hiding these things that didn't work.
For sure. Shifting to visuals.
The shot list was made well in advance because everything had to be hyper timed out.
Sure.
So that basically included everything from, wide versus close up. Is it tripod? Is it handheld? Is it sticks? Like whatever. It included all of this. What was not included was some kind of cinematography Bible. And so I failed to lay out almost like rules of what does this world need to look like. So the shots we got in terms of framing and movement were what was planned.
Sure.
But some of these nuances of, how is the color in the space and how is the light versus the dark, how rich are the blacks, how bright are the whites, like all of these little things that are important just wasn't included in that.
Sure.
And I think that is part of where that strayed. And that added to the fact that on set, it was always a battle of time.
That's right.
There was minimal space for correction in the moment either. So it was failed to do up front, and in the opportunities where we could have caught and addressed it, there was a lack of time.
Sure.
And I think the combination of those two things hurt the film as a whole. But I'm also trying to think, like, what are other moments where we feel like that happened other than the Medusa scene?
Yeah, so please hear that I am not blaming anyone in the visuals department or you or anyone. In the end, we were not pleased with the product visually as well. So, mostly continuity-wise, we just fell short. And that's more lighting-wise. So, like, a character opens the door after the interview and the lighting doesn't match.
Right.
And it's not a hit at the gaffer. That's not a hit at you. I just mean we could have planned differently. We could have maybe had different lightscapes. And I'm not also saying we now have unlocked the master of lighting. I mean, in the future,
we will be one step ahead than
we'll
we
be
were
one
this
step
time.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that reasonable to say?
Yeah, certainly. And I think with every film we make, that's ultimately the goal.
Of course.
How can in every department and every aspect of what we're doing step up in at least one way?
Sure.
Like you and I, even in terms of this podcast, we try to say like every week, like, okay, how can we make this just a little bit better?
That's right.
Because everyone can like set like the impossible goal, but then it's not actionable.
For sure.
Whereas if we set a goal within our reach and then we keep doing that, we can keep climbing because we're only one reach away from the next thing. And I think that approach in our stuff is going to be huge. Like now we didn't storyboard this film, which is clearly obvious in the product. But now that is going to be integrated in our storytelling moving forward. Therefore, upgrading the visuals department. And so as we continue to do these things, we'll continue stepping to where we need to be. Because we're not where we need to be. You and I have not made a film that we're proud of. We have not made a film that we want to show the world that has had even a taste of the impact we want to have in the world.
Yeah, it's devastating, I know.
And at the same time, we have to acknowledge that that takes an outsized amount of work and input.
Sure.
And that is the season that we're in now. We're in the season of learning we're doing this through iteration. We need to take more shots on goal and each time adjust for the wind. Weird analogy, but
I'm with it though.
This is the work that it is going to take for us to make
It's
one
like
day
darts, bro.
these films that inspire us.
Yeah.
And it's easy to almost be like, I couldn't even fathom making that story or coming up with that. Even when we go to the movies, we watch these films and it's like they're impossibly good.
Yeah.
But also the films we make now, Death by Murder included, is impossibly good compared to the film I made in middle school.
Sure.
Therefore, I think it's a reasonable hypothesis that if we continue learning and we continue being self-aware and not leading with ego and bringing these lessons we learned into our learning, that we can make
students,
something
bro.
impossibly good relative to where we are today.
Agreed.
In another few iterations of our storytelling. And there's no reason we shouldn't always continue to have that mindset because maybe even when we have something that could be societally approved of and welcomed, we can still have that same mindset and try to figure out how do we make something impossibly good relative to what we just did. And if we always lead with that, I think we might end up somewhere closer to where we want to be. but who knows?
Completely agreed. What's a Dakota plan, man?
So, I don't even know where to start.
We talked a little bit about location. That kind of worked out in the end,
Yeah.
but it was hard at first.
So I got a few here,
Okay.
and I want you to talk about this first one.
Oh, I don't really want to do it.
The day of the shoot, one of the actors told us that they weren't going to be there. So you had to cast yourself in the movie. Talk to me about that and what that was like. So that's a huge adaptation live on the spot.
The night before, I had texted an actor, called an actor a few, 20 times, and they did not pick up.
No, they did not.
So that led me to believe that there was a chance that they were not coming to set. And at one point, Spencer, the night before, said, "Hey, be ready to maybe play that role." And I think I laughed. I was like, "No, he'll show up. Don't worry, he'll show up." He did not show up.
He did not.
And that's okay.
Show up.
That's okay because it just wasn't the time, bro.
Yeah.
It was too expensive to be annoyed. It was minor. At that point, it was just minor.
It was just okay.
Shot was up
it
at.
felt that simple.
It did. Shot was up at 7:00 a.m. He texted me at 6:36. So I put on a hoodie and pretended to be someone else, I guess. And it didn't work. I'm not an actor. And I think everyone on set learned that firsthand.
But give yourself a little more credit. Like we did make the
No,
film.
it was
and
a poor.
the scenes occurred. But yeah, it wasn't ideal.
It wasn't ideal.
But we had to adapt.
And if I may say, I think he would have been fabulous.
He was
for the
great.
role.
And also the part was so
Tailored to
specific
them?
to him
Uh-huh.
that Taye playing it, it didn't work. But we had to adapt.
Square peg round hole situation.
For sure.
But that's okay. We adapted there.
Next
Another
thing that
crew
went wrong.
member. Do you want to go there?
Go there.
We had another crew member that was supposed to arrive somewhere midday to be a second AC and run slates.
And grip as well.
Uh-huh. Our gaffer had zero hands and zero support whatsoever in the department. A lot of our talent acted as a grip. I acted as a grip. Spencer acted as a grip. Everyone was a grip. Which, again, goes back to the economy of set and how beautiful it was to share and explain and just, I don't know, express together. More than that, it was difficult. It was hard not having that support. I mean, it was disappointing to have a crew member say they would show up and they didn't.
Yeah.
But again, it was too expensive to care and
And we just
too
had
expensive
we
to
just had to keep going.
in the documentary, I don't know if you remember this. Of course you remember this. I don't know why I said that. But our second AD came up to you and said, "We just lost an actor. Taye's going to play the role." And you said, "Heard." And then he went and did something else.
Yeah.
So that was the bandwidth in which we could devote to that very serious, I might say, situation. And quite frankly, that's all I could
Absolutely.
do.
I think one of the other things that comes to mind for things going wrong
Yeah.
was the first scene we shot was an exterior shot, and this happened to be at the same time the neighbors were doing roof work. I'm talking constant hammer, saws, everything you can
Off.
imagine.
It was off.
Obliterated sound. Basically,
If we were filming Dunkirk, it would have been fabulous.
yeah, I mean, it was that loud. So basically what we just had to do was film the scene enough times where like each individual line fell in one gap where it was between hammer swings. Like it was that precise, but it does impact the way the scene is cut. It's cut a little too
It's choppy.
fast and aggressive because we're cutting and we're dancing around all these hammer bangs and whatnot. So that was another thing that went wrong that we couldn't have prepared for. But we adapted and we just had to keep going. It was the same perspective of we basically just had to be like, heard.
Yep.
Let's get the shot.
Mm-hmm. And we did.
That was that.
It was fun. I think, I don't know, everything else feels so minor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
we could outline all the details forever and ever. But
good.
I think the most important thing was just the experience of putting on this set and telling this story and getting to do it with great people. And
Yeah.
I will forever cherish this set and this
Yeah.
experience as like a defining moment in our learning
Yeah.
and our becoming the storytellers that we are.
For sure. And I think that's something I want to end on too, is just the set was ours and ours alone. It was something you and I created so intentionally. And every part of it.
We also started without knowing how to do it.
Right.
Like, it would have been scary to do it alone
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
because we were doing something that to us was impossible.
Yes. And
Because we
it just couldn't have
never even attempted anything involving production insurance and getting like locations and there was so much stuff that we just hadn't done before.
That's right.
Um,
Just doesn't.
but getting to do it with you was truly an honor and something I will always value. And like I couldn't have done it with anyone else.
No, brother man. I would not have been able to. I would not have. What's after?
I wouldn't have even allowed the thought to go further.
I
if
wouldn't
you
have
weren't
wanted
in the
to,
room.
bro. Like it just wasn't.
I would have just been like, haha, funny joke. Move on.
Every part of it, the bad stuff, the story, we learned from, but we learned from that together. It's excruciating to me that I didn't do what I sought out to do in story.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you kind of are okay with it, the fact that you're like, hey man, you'll get it next time, that kind of means a lot to me. And I don't know, bro. Like it.
I don't think you've ever said that.
I don't think so either. And I don't think I've ever acknowledged that. But like the fact that you say to me when I'm writing sometimes like, hey, you're actually on the right track. And I'm not someone who really needs a whole lot of external, I don't know, compliments. But like for some reason, like I was really low looking at that. I was like, gee, I don't know what I'm doing. Like what? And you were like, hey man, think how much we did learn from this. And it was just a zoom out voyeur shot of like, he's absolutely right, and I'm being a total jerk. Focus on what I got here, because I got a lot.
Huh. That's actually really fascinating because you and I partnered in making something and it didn't work. So like it would make sense for us to be like, okay, we did thing X, which was make a film together, and the result was it doesn't work. Shouldn't we not make a film together?
Right.
But like that was never even a thought.
This is the
And
first
I think
time
that goes
I've thought
both
of
ways of like,
saying that. Yeah.
likewise, you towards me, you easily could have been like, well, man, never going to make a film with him again.
Sure.
Because there was a million mistakes that I made. But the fact that instead the question was like, what's next?
Yeah.
Like, let's figure this out.
Exactly.
And
that was the first reaction.
yeah. And I think we'll always have those moments because the next film we're going to make will be flawed too.
That's right.
And hopefully in new, different ways so we can then learn the lessons from that.
Mm-hmm.
But truly, there's no other human being who this would have even been possible with. And people did tell us it was impossible. They told us that it shouldn't be done. They told us to not do it. They told us to give up. They told us we were crazy. And if I didn't have you by my side, I might have believed them.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being a friend first, I think thank you for recognizing both my flaws, shortcomings, and what I'm good at. And also not discriminating between the two. You saw me as just someone who was there, who loved it. You saw me as someone who wanted to be there and collaborate and create. And never once did you say, hey, writer, hey, AD. You saw me as and this goes for everyone on set too, by the way, because they've all kind of said this to me, like, you saw people, bro. You saw people first. You saw creators and people who wanted to express themselves. And you, for lack of a better term, you gave them that silver screen to paint on. You gave this amazing opportunity to so many people where we were safe to create for the sake of creating. And that's what we're about, bro. That's what matters.
All the time, people from that set and from other sets we've done come up to me and tell me about how much it is a pleasure to ever get to work with you. And sometimes when I hear that, I can't help but think, man, how lucky am I that I don't just get to work with him when the set rolls around.
I was talking about himself.
No, I'm talking about you.
I didn't know that.
Back to my
You're
genuine
so sweet.
kindness and compliment.
You're so sweet. Look at us getting emotional on a podcast.
You
Look at
thought
us.
you thought that I was talking about myself.
I thought you're saying like the royal you. Like I didn't know you were complimenting me,
this
bro.
is
'cause
this is Tay.
that's not who I am.
But what I'm saying is the fact that that's a fraction of the time I get to spend being your friend, creating with you, telling stories with you, putting on film sets where people have good experiences with you. The fact that I don't get to just do that once a quarter when the set rolls around, but every day we wake up and you ask me, what are we doing today?
Yeah.
Or
What you
or I
doing?
ask you, what are we doing today?
That's right.
And that's the only question. Like that,
Yeah, man.
that's a
That's nice.
huge honor and privilege to get to do that with you every day.
Likewise, bro. Let's make the next one, bro.
All right. I
Thank
can't
you.
wait. I truly cannot wait. And we're already
Thank
doing
you.
it.
We are.
We've been talking about this film we made, Death by Murder.
That's right.
And you might be curious, why don't we like it? What doesn't work? Why is it like this?
Well,
Well, Tay and I actually watched the entire thing and broke down our thoughts on this very podcast. And you can click that video on screen right now. Thank you all so much for watching.